Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. We're going to begin by introducing the team from UMass, and then we're going to give you some information about how you can participate in today's session, and then we will be able to introduce the speakers before we get into the questions. So the team at UMass Amherst will help run today's webinar virtually. My name is McKenna Meager, and I'm a sophomore pursuing a dual degree in public health and nutrition. I will be moderating the panel for today's webinar. And then Aaliyah is our other UMass student who will be moderating the chat. She is a microbiology major. She's a junior at UMass. And both of us are part of the Student Alumni Association. Lindsay McGrath is also here. She's our advisor and will also be helping. She is the director of student and young alumni programs for UMass Amherst Alumni Association. And her email is here. Should you have any questions, you can definitely reach out to her about any alumni events in the future. As far as the chat goes, Aaliyah is going to be moderating the chat, as I said. So today's session will be recorded and then later added to our online library for career resources. By joining this session, you are given consent to be a part of the recorded session, and at the bottom of your screen, there is a chat option depicted here on the presentation. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, you can put them in there, and Aaliyah will be sure to either answer them or get them asked and answered by the panelists. Now to introduce our panelists, first we have Craig Berry. Craig graduated in 2018 with a degree in resource economics. He lives in Lincoln Park, Chicago, and works as an account executive at LinkedIn. In addition, Christiana Burnett is here. Christiana graduated in 2015 with a degree in management. She lives in Pilsen, Chicago, and works as a media planner at Bader Rudder. Our third panelist is Nate Chatney. Nate graduated in 2014 and was a marketing major. He now lives in Buena Park and works as a computer success consultant at YCharts. Alrighty. Now that everyone has been introduced, we'll move on to answering questions. Well, to kick things off, we do want to acknowledge the majority of people are self-isolating right now in order to help curb the spread of the novel coronavirus. This is an unprecedented situation, and we do want to address its impact before we get into the questions about what a city is typically like. We also hope that everyone is staying safe and that these challenging times will come to an end soon. So now, specifically related to COVID-19, we're going to ask the panelists a few questions about that and what it looks like in their cities. So if you guys would be willing to answer the following questions. First, are you able to work remotely? And if so, how are you adjusting to the change?
I'll go ahead and get us kicked off here. Yes, able to work remotely. Adjusting fine. I mean, being holed up in an apartment for any length of time without a whole lot else to do other than work is challenging. So one of the best things you can do in a situation like this is just find ways to engage yourself and grow, because there's a lot you can do within four walls to keep yourself occupied, and also just not even think of this as a time that you can survive, but also thrive. So adjusting reasonably well.
I'll go next. My company actually has quite a large remote workforce. So we have the systems in place to work from home. Specifically, I wasn't typically a person who worked from home, but I've used a few shoe boxes and other creative things around my house to sort of set up a working area for me. And I feel like I'm adjusting to it pretty well.
Same here for all of them. I can work remote. It's going pretty good. I got a good setup now that I'm in the rhythm of things, and just adjusting. So it's going well.
We're glad to hear that that's going well for all of you. And then in addition, what resources are specific to your city are able to help you during this time in practicing self-care?
So as far as just staying on top of what's going on regarding COVID, Chicago has a text service where they text us information about meetings that the mayor's about to have or any important updates, which I found really helpful because after the first week of staying on top of the news, I got really exhausted. So it's nice to know that I don't have to stay on top of the news, but I'll still get some information about what's happening right to my cell phone.
I found the city also has a really nice website to just stay on top of things. I don't even know what the URL is off the top of my head, but that website, personally I found very impactful just in terms of keeping on top of how long is the stay-at-home order going to extend for, confirmed cases, stuff like that. Obviously without reading too much, because if you do, you'll drive yourself crazy, but it's a good way to keep your finger on the pulse of things.
And admittedly, I am bunkered down in Boston, so I'm not in Chicago at the moment, so I'm a bit out of touch on the day-to-day. So for this realm, I'm not too helpful.
Thank you all for sharing. Just so our attendees know, those are the only two COVID-19 related questions we have, but we are going to go through a couple other sections of questions. So I just wanted to let you know what the sections will be prior to going through them so that you kind of know where to plug in those questions in the chat if if anything goes unanswered. So we are going to cover a bit about transportation, housing, budgeting, as well as UMass Amherst resources. So you can expect those sections coming up. So as far as opening questions go, we would love you guys to shed some light on what you think the benefits of living in the city are for you.
I would definitely say.
Go ahead, Christina.
Chicago, I think, is probably the best city in the US. And yes, I'm biased because I'm from Chicago, but there are just so many fun things that you can do in the city. There's always something going on. You have world-class museums, the transportation system gets the job done. And there are just like a lot of amenities to living in the city. I don't think I could consider moving outside of the city.
Yeah, so moving from Boston, so I live about 10 minutes south in Boston. I have to give it to Christina. I think it's just the best city. Like objectively, it just has everything you need. I mean, it's a gorgeous, beautiful skyline. It's very affordable. It has a beautiful river walk through. You have a lake, which is like a beach. I mean, everything's right there. And for those who don't know, which I was surprised about, I'm assuming, maybe you're all from Massachusetts, I'm used to Boston, which is just a very dense downtown and then suburbs. And then the only other city I really knew was New York, which is just massive. And Chicago isn't really either of those. So where I live in Lincoln Park, if you write me a letter, it's still the city of Chicago, but it feels kind of neighborhood. You have people walking their dogs and strollers, and it's very quiet and calm. And though you're in the city, you can see the skyline in the distance. So the good thing is you're close enough to get to all the activities where you want to go. But if you're someone who doesn't like being straight downtown, you do have that extra zone that I think Chicago wonderfully offers. It's very decentralized, where you have those buffer rings where you're still close to everything. There's a lot going on, but it's not as manic. It's very affordable and you have so much to do. So highly recommend living in the city.
Right on. You guys teed it up really well. And a lot of it, yeah. I mean, if you can get up to Lincoln Park, that kind of feels like the Cambridge of Chicago to me. That kind of vibe, the brickwork everywhere. It does feel that way for sure. None of the Harvard or the MIT, but we're splitting hairs here. But there's definitely the thing that really sticks out to me about Chicago is, well, certainly the big city feel without any of the big city pretensions. Lots going on, plenty of things to do. There's never a night of the week that you're sitting, outside wondering like, man, why is there nothing to do? I'm so bored. That you have to try for that to be the case. You really do. And at the same time, you've got this wonderful sense of Midwest hospitality, and everybody's super nice. And it's much more logically laid out than Boston, which, as much as I'm a New England guy through and through, finding your way around a grid is much easier than not. So there's a lot of advantages, definitely.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate the Boston comparison, as I know that that's something that a lot of UMass students are familiar with. So that's awesome. In addition, what would you guys say are the top 3 must-visit places in Chicago? I know that kind of puts you on the spot, but.
So the number one place that people should definitely visit in the city is the Garfield Park Conservatory. You don't even have to be a big person who really likes flowers or plants. It's really just a really beautiful experience to see what the city has to offer outside of downtown. So it's a little bit west of the major business district, but the Garfield Park is one of the best parks in the city. It's underrated. Most people who live here don't even go there. So I would say that, like, as a Chicago insider. And the conservatory itself is, I think, one of the most beautiful locations probably in the Midwest. Second would be the Roby House by Frank Lloyd Wright. And this assumes that you're into architecture. And even if you're not into architecture and you want to get a sense of what Chicago has to offer, the Roby House is probably one of Frank Lloyd Wright's masterpieces. And it's in the Hyde Park neighborhood, which is, again, a neighborhood that's away from downtown. And it'll get you to see a different side of the city. And then the third is a Chicago staple. It's Zany's Comedy Club. So if you don't know, Chicago is one of the biggest cities for comedy. And Zany's is this like little hole in the wall, janky looking club. You would never know that people like Dave Chappelle and all the other big name comics did shows at Zany's, but it's definitely great if you have the time to catch a show there. They usually have like $5 tickets on Tuesdays. So it's a really fun place to visit.
All right, I'll hop in. The first one, and you just gave me the idea, Christina, so thank you. I just had to write it down. It doesn't sound exciting, but trust me, it'll blow your mind, is the Architecture Boat Tour. It is insanely awesome. It's, fun fact, the second most popular tour in the world behind the Vatican. And it's just a cool boat tour that takes you through the center of the city, talking about buildings in ways that you never knew you could appreciate. So it's awesome. It was literally the first thing I did in Chicago when I landed, because I couldn't get into my Airbnb at the time, so I had to get a tour. But I do that. Second is along the Riverwalk. So Chicago now made it so the entire river is kind of below street level, and all the businesses have to have a walkway with some pop-up bars and shops. During the summer, there's nothing better than just walking along that after work. And then another one which I would recommend is the second tallest building is the Hancock Building, and in that there's a lounge on the 95th floor called the Signature Room. So a lot of people, when they come to Chicago, they go to the Sears Tower, which is the tallest, to the observation deck to kind of look down over the glass mirror and stuff like that. But it ends up being around $30 just to get up. But right over here is the Signature Room. It's free to get up there. You can get a $10 cocktail, have the same view, and just kick back and enjoy it. So whenever someone comes and visits, we walk the river to the Hancock Building, go up. You don't need a reservation, grab a drink, and kind of overlook Chicago.
Love it. Craig, that first one's going to tee off into one of my first ones too. It's actually two things in one, which is one of the most obvious Chicago tourist attractions, the Bean.
Yep.
It's talked about a lot. It's hyped up like crazy. When you see that thing in person, it is just as impressive as you think it's going to be. Even more so. I remember seeing it for the first time. I was like, wow, it's the first time I haven't been underwhelmed by some man-made art installation that I've seen hyped up all over the internet. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. It's huge. It's reflective. There's a reason so many people take pictures in front of it, because it is beautiful. Right across the street is my number two, which is, I think it's Cindy's in the top above the Athletic Association, right? Okay.
Cindy's Rooftop.
Okay, Cindy's Rooftop. Yep. Fantastic place to get a drink. And it's a great place to watch. I mean, you can't really watch the sun goes down because it's facing east, but you have a very beautiful unobstructed view of Millennium Park. It's got to be one of the prettiest places you can go out, and everybody knows that, which is why there's always a long wait to get in, but it is absolutely worth it. And the last one for me is going to be kind of one that's, again, pretty obvious, but you gotta definitely take it in and appreciate it, which is just the Lake Trail. That runs the whole coast of Lake Michigan, all the way up to actually past the North Chicago border, which is awesome. It's awesome to walk, it's awesome to bike, and there's always people running on it. Well, not now, but every other time. And I have the good fortune of living right across the street from it, and I go running there, biking there all the time. It's one of my favorite things about the city.
Awesome. Those all sound really interesting. And I love that you each kind of had really different takes on the top three places. So definitely a long bucket list for people to check off when they go. So the next section of questions pertains to UMass Amherst specifically. So first, how did your time at UMass prepare you for your current job and living situation? And in that, if you want to elaborate a little bit, just a little bit more on your job, so that people can understand exactly what you do within your companies, that would be probably really helpful.
I'm happy to get us started on this one. So McKenna, you introduced me as a computer success specialist, which, while a misnomer, is actually not that far from the truth. The company I work for, YCharts, what they do is financial data services for financial advisors. And essentially my role there is sort of 60-40 split between inside sales and enablement of use of our platform. Without getting into too much of the details, because frankly, it's not that interesting. What is interesting is how well my time at Eisenberg prepared me for that. And not in the way you'd think. Certainly, I do use a lot of marketing because you're marketing to people and you're selling to people every second of every single day. That's life. So that's something that I certainly bring in. But really, the way that Eisenberg helped me and UMass as a whole helped me, because I was not only in the Eisenberg school, but I also spent some time with a little bit of my own personal time with the music program and some other initiatives, was a lot of just good, solid work ethic and problem solving skills. That's really one of the best things you can take away from the Eisenberg businesses programs. Doesn't matter which one you take. It could be marketing, finance, it could be any type of accounting or operations, but you're going to leave with that same level of rigor and drive and the ability to execute in the face of things not always going your way, which was absolutely the case when I moved here. I was here 5 months and ran out of money, got fired, and was like 2 missed bill payments away from getting evicted. And now all of that is gone, and I'm in much better shape. I will owe a lot of that to the rigor and the discipline and the tenacity in the face of adversity that I got from Eisenberg. So big credit.
Yeah. And as a great kind of segue to that, UMass, I love UMass, obviously being there, but I think it's such a great middle ground between grit and intelligence. So I think our programs are great, our students are great, like kind of the work hard, play hard is UMass mentality. So we have that balance of having the resources and the intelligence to play at these higher levels, but we bring that grit work ethic that I feel like everyone just has from being like a more, I don't know, like UMass is just gritty. We're not an Ivy League. Like we show up, but we earn it. So I think that at UMass, not only do you have the great system, but the people are your biggest resources in 2 different ways that will tie in. So one, we have 22,000, probably more now, undergrads that are everywhere in the country, that are in every company. So the odds are, and I haven't found a case where it isn't the case, whatever company you're looking at, there's a UMass grad. I haven't found a company that doesn't have one. So any question you have about, is my career the right choice? How am I ever going to become a blank with this mate? Like whatever it is, someone's already done it. Reach out to them. Hey, I'm a rising junior. I'm interested in media, but I'm an accounting major. Like, how'd you make the switch? You got 10 minutes? I don't know, random example. People are always willing to help, which kind of brought me to my thing is just invest in the people you meet. Freshman year, I met someone who was a senior. Sophomore year, I did a sales internship and got really turned on to sales. He saw I was doing it and reached out and said, LinkedIn has an internship program, which I didn't know what LinkedIn sold because I thought it was just Facebook for business. And ended up loving the company, didn't get the internship, but kind of went all in on finding and realizing it was my dream company. Used him, reached out to other alumni that worked there. Then I realized the entry-level program, the woman running it is a UMass grad. So we hit it off. She was my interview. She said the same thing. She loves the grit that UMass students have. She wants to include. So, that was very, very fortunate. And then from there, a friend that I met freshman year and hadn't talked to 4 years ended up getting the same job. So we moved out and moved in together. So looking back, I wouldn't be in the state of Illinois, let alone at LinkedIn, if it wasn't for the people I met at UMass. So I'd say there's so many resources that might not be put in your face, but are there if you look for it. And it's going to be in the people, whether they're alumni or people in your classes. Just start now to meet a lot of people because it could pay off. And that's kind of how my whole career got started. And I'm very glad it did.
Yeah, I think Craig makes a really good point that you can find UMass alumni in really unexpected places. So I was a management major at Eisenberg, and I had no idea that I would end up in marketing or advertising, but I ended up becoming a media planner at Beta Rudder, which is the largest agricultural focused media agency and advertising agency in the US. So I work on an animal health client that focuses on medicine for basically livestock animals. And being a city girl, I had no exposure to farm life or rural animals until I went to UMass. And my best friend to this day, who actually just came to visit me a few months ago, owns a farm and owns horses. And when I was at UMass, she would take me when she would go train her horses. So I got a little bit exposure there. And then when I ended up at Beta Rudder with this beautiful Highlander cow behind me, and I had to sort of get back into the mindset of the American farmer and horse riders. I looked to her to actually get some insight into who my customer is. And now she sends me pictures of her using my client's products. And then I actually found out that the marketing manager that my equine team reports to is a UMass grad. And so now we're like best friends.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for sharing that. In addition to that, kind of stemming off, what resources, if any, did you use at UMass to help you obtain your current or previous job? I know, Craig, you kind of touched upon that a little bit, but Christiana and Nate, if you have anything to add, or even Craig, if you have anything more to add, please feel free to.
Yeah, I'll add one more quick thing is I think the really cool thing about being a student is you're not like you have all the leverage in the world and you can just let your curiosity drive you. So for instance, after doing that sales internship, myself and a few others that did it really liked doing sales and wanted to learn sales. And at the time, Eisenberg or UMass didn't have any sales curriculum, and it was still early across the country. So we grabbed Professor Glennon and made a sales club and started doing sales tournaments and inviting in companies. And now we are the 4 people in the whole school who are liaisons to these big tech companies, inviting them in to do sales. Well, now we have a relationship with them. So it's kind of cool that as a student, you have the room to kind of leverage your classes or your interests to create something to make those connections. So, you know, if you want to create a project with a professor and then go to companies, like whatever it is, I'd say leverage you being a student and you being driven and curious, and leverage the networks and the systems you have to create something. Interview people, make a show, especially with everyone at home, and use those tools as connections into your careers you want to go, and kind of start to add value and contribute really early on. So I'd say if something doesn't exist, go ahead and make something that you can use.
The UMass resource that actually helped me get my first job in advertising was Lindsay, who wrote me a recommendation for my job. So definitely feel free to reach out to the advisors of the student organizations that you were in at UMass, or your professors, if there's like a letter of recommendation or just some advice on how to get your first job if you're in the same situation that I was in.
I don't have a whole lot to add here because I didn't really make use of a lot of the resources. So maybe that's the message, is there's a lot of resources that I never really took advantage of in the full, that I know a lot of people have and gotten a lot of value out of it. But one of the things I would absolutely encourage is anyone watching this who's, you know, thinking about what do I want to do for a career. My path was a little bit non-traditional. I worked for myself for a couple of years, but when I graduated, so it made it a little bit more focused on just like my own lane and wasn't thinking about a whole lot else. But, you know, one of the things that is awesome about UMass is that, like Craig pointed out, there are so many relationships with different companies in all parts of the world, and they just keep growing because alums, you know, they just kind of, they're like, what's a plant that has the seeds that blow around in the wind? Dandelion? Yeah, like a dandelion. Like UMass blows on a dandelion and all the little seeds go everywhere. That's just how it goes. So leverage that. That's powerful.
I like that analogy. That was a good one. All right, thank you guys. The next section that we have is the transportation section. And to kick that one off, we were wondering, how did you decide that moving to the city was the best decision for you? And what kind of drew you to Chicago specifically?
I'll start with this one. This is one of my favorite questions. Chicago specifically was secondary to a big life change. And this is, I can only speak personally here. I grew up in Gardner For any of you familiar with Gardner, yeah, I see McKenna smiling and nodding. It is a very small little mill town where not a lot happens. Maybe 25,000 people. I'm there right now, actually. It's because, like Craig, I'm sheltering in place at my parents' house. Um, I got kind of bored with that life and just felt like I was running in circles. I needed a change and just figured it like I need to go reinvent myself and figure out who the heck Nate Chatney is. And Chicago seemed like the perfect place to do that because it felt enough like Boston that it was familiar. It was far enough away that I could be somebody that nobody knew and just figure myself out. And it wasn't so far away that I couldn't visit family. Only after I got there did I realize just how right of a decision that was because I had it pitted up against LA or maybe New Orleans or Nashville, one of those, because I'm a huge music guy. I love music and have been playing music for years. But once you actually get to Chicago, you realize just how much it has to offer in so many ways.
Yeah, I just got a +1 to what you kind of said there at the end of Chicago. But kind of how I got out there is in senior year, I kind of wanted to try out a new bigger city, but I wasn't really sure which one. It was kind of like New York, Chicago, maybe like West Coast, but that was a little far. And then I got the offer and they were like San Francisco or Chicago, and kind of like you, Nate, I was like, people rave about California, but that's a hike. So Chicago seemed like a very easy first step. Like the flight is 2 hours, so it's like the same drive that I took to school. So I'm like, okay, like that's super doable. It's very cheap, and it's cool. I like Chicago. Well, now I know it. Again, I moved out there blind. Like I was there for an interview, landed in the morning, flew out at night, and then like moved, and I had no idea what I was expecting. And since getting there, Nate, like I am still amazed. Like the restaurants have more themes than I've ever seen. The bars have more themes. During the summer, there's at least 24 festivals all around town. Every day is a new one. And it's just so much going on. And like, the Midwest hospitality, it's so nice where I feel like and everyone's like a transplant from the Midwest. So everyone's kind of together and it's just like a good place. It kind of adopts you and brings you under your wing a bit. It's not too busy, not too crazy. So I guess a mix of wanting to move somewhere different, but not radical and far, getting the offer. And then like in hindsight, kind of like, wow, I'm so glad I did not go to California because I love Chicago. So
this question doesn't quite apply to me because I'm from Chicago, but I'll just give my 2 cents anyway. The reason why I decided to come back to Chicago instead of a different city like New York or LA is because I knew I wanted to be in a large city. So it would have to be either Chicago, New York, or LA, just because I like to be able to go to a different neighborhood and experience something different. Like Chicago's culture is not monotonous at all. Each neighborhood is kind of like its own mini city, so you can get a totally different experience just by going somewhere else. And I knew I didn't want to do LA because it's a big driving city and I actually don't have a driver's license, which is not an issue in the city. And I didn't want to do New York just because it feels a little too dense and hectic for me. And as Craig mentioned earlier, Chicago is really good about having residential areas where you'll see families and good schools and people walking their dogs, as well as the hustle and bustle of the city. So I wouldn't have to choose between one situation or the other.
Yeah, Christy, I want to add to that. That's so true. Just for like an idea for those who don't know anything about Chicago, the way I now describe it to everyone is like you have Boston, which is very tight knit. It has a lot of character. It's blue collar. We got our sports teams. It has that cohesion. And then I think of a New York, which is like, this metropolis, and you're on your own. Like you walk through the streets and people are walking by you. You could be on fire. Like people are just not going to look like. So I feel like people move to a place like New York for themselves, or they need to like, I need to go there for this. But when you go to a Boston or a Chicago, you move there for the city. So the city has its culture. People come and become a part of it. They participate, they take. So it's like you join that community. That's very similar to how Boston has a community, instead of joining this completely foreign city where everyone's too busy to talk to you and you don't know how to make, everyone's like just super part of the same club. So I like that a lot. And that made the transition really easy. It was kind of like, a step brother to Boston. It was like, all right, like you're kind of in the middle, you're pretty similar. And it felt easier to relate to.
So this next question kind of stems off that one. And Christiana, you kind of answered it with the not having a car or license in the city, but how do you guys get to and from work as far as kind of public transportation, or all of that. How does that work in Chicago?
So people have a lot to say about the public transit in Chicago. I will say that I like it better than what I've experienced in New York, just because I think it's a lot more streamlined. We have several trains, a few subways, and some buses that run all day and night. So I take the train to work every day, and I used to live actually a little bit further south of Pilsen, and the train wasn't very close to me, and I had to take the bus, which made my commute a little longer and a little less pleasant. So I decided to move a little bit more centrally so I could be on a train route and get to work downtown in less than 30 minutes. So that's how I get around to work. And as far as getting around the city, I chose a very walkable neighborhood. So the grocery store is 3 minutes away from my house. The train is 2 minutes away. My favorite restaurant is 5 minutes away. There's a museum 7 minutes away. So, I mean, everything that I needed is like right within this neighborhood. And what I can't get to, I can get to on the train.
Yeah. So as far as I am definitely the outlier from people I know, I drive to work. Reason being is I live with 2 people I work with. So parking's like $10 a day divided by 3. It ends up being like the same as a train pass, but more convenient. That being said, I don't know anyone who doesn't use public transportation as the main means of commuting. It's like the standard, it's super good, get wherever you need. And then as far as like day-to-day Ubers, and then they also have what's called divvy bikes. I think Boston has city bikes, same thing, like pick up, drop off locations, which are everywhere. So I always hop on those once it's nice.
So Craig, looks like we got 2 outliers on this call. 2 whole outliers. So I drive to work. Well, I did drive to work. I don't have to drive anywhere right now. But there's Y-Charts' office is right downtown in River North, which is just north of the river that Craig, I think you mentioned Riverwalk, where that is. It's just north of that. And there's a parking garage right across the street. I get a monthly pass there. And I initially, when I first moved to Chicago, I lived in Uptown. I took the red line on the CTA. You guys would call it the T, we call it the L. So I took the red line on the L and then took the bus for the next year. And I have to say, Christiana, I'm with you. I don't know why everyone's got so much to say about public transportation in Chicago. I think it's very good. I think it's better than Boston. It's much more logically laid out. Then again, there's really not much that isn't more logically laid out than Boston, but here we are. But I mostly drive just because I love driving. And that's, well, like racing cars on the weekends is one of my favorite things to do, and I do it all the time. So I figure like that thing just sits in the garage the rest of the time anyway, so I may as well take it out during the week and go bumper to bumper with the traffic. I'm one of those sadists that actually enjoys that sort of thing. I saw a question in the chat a second ago asking how much the monthly passes were, and if that
I was just gonna see if possibly you could add that into your.
Yeah. So if you guys are talking about like transit passes, there's a few options. We have a system called Ventra in Chicago, which is basically a card system. Actually, I might even have my Ventra card with me. I can show you what it looks like. I have one of the old ones. This is one of the old Ventra cards right here. It's like a money card. You load the card with value, and you can put just regular money on it, or you can buy a pass. The most expensive pass you can get is $105 for 30 days. Then they've also got 1, 2, 7, or 1, 2, 5, 7, and 15 day underneath it. So no shortage of options.
Awesome. Thank you for answering that one. And I think Aaliyah had one other question from the chat to add into this section. Aaliyah?
Yes, definitely. Thank you. So we do have one question that was open for everybody. Just asking, what was the hardest part about moving to Chicago for each of you individually?
For me, I think it was just the excitement of the unknown, and I know Christiana, you're from Chicago, but me and Nate, you related. So I mean, I graduated, I'm moving out there, first adult job. I know one other person in the city. I moved out, not having a place yet because I like stayed in housing. So where am I going to live? Family was at home. I'm a big family guy. Friends were at home. I have my friend's girlfriend was at home, and I was just like, here we go, just like jumping. So I guess I guess the hardest part was planting my roots. For a while, I felt like I was just on a prolonged business trip. And I kind of just need to like make it more at home, actually invest in decorating the room a bit and just kind of planting my roots. And thankfully, like through work, I made really good friends who will be friends for life. And, you know, the transition wasn't actually hard. I think just getting in the mindset of living in a new state or living in Illinois of all states just took a bit, but it was a good transition. And I didn't really have any major hiccups along my journey.
I would say the hardest thing for me was picking a neighborhood to live in, because I know that there are a lot of really great neighborhoods in the city and they all have something unique to offer. So when I was trying to find an apartment to move in, I didn't want to be too far away from my family. I didn't want to be too far away from work, but that still leaves so many great options. So it took me a while to settle on Pilsen. I think it was the right choice, but that is something that you definitely will encounter when you start finding places to live in the city is which place should you actually live in the city?
This is a really good question. The hardest thing about moving to Chicago, and I'm sure everybody has a different answer to this. Mine is simply that it was a growth opportunity for sure in so many ways. When you put yourself outside your comfort zone and you're used to something for so long, that is like, this is life. This is what life is. It's a neat little box and everything fits in it. And I understand this box and anything outside of it is terrifying. When you just take a giant wrecking ball and knock the box over and you look around, whoa, look at all this. It can be a little scary, but it's also the greatest thing that could ever happen, because in those times you find out, one, who you really are, two, what you're made of, and three, you learn about so many things that you could be passionate about or could experience. Great example would be, moving to Chicago, I discovered a love for R&B and hip hop music I didn't know I had. Getting to see some really amazing musicians and artists perform in this wonderful city, and there's just so many of them. This place is just teeming with talent. So getting to experience that, just like, oh, here's what I listen to, here's what I listen to. All of a sudden, right up until you don't anymore, and that's when life starts to change. So it's the hardest thing, but it's the most rewarding thing for sure.
100% on that.
Thank you guys for answering that question. Any other ones from the chat, Aaliyah?
Yeah, we have one other one that can probably go out to everybody. I know that Craig had answered it also, but it was the drive easy to Chicago? And how did you actually move your things from Massachusetts to Chicago, or from UMass to Chicago, if that's how you guys went about your travels?
I can talk about how I moved my stuff back from UMass to Chicago, which I was an RA my last year, so I had my own dorm and I filled it to the brim with stuff. So it was kind of a challenge of how I was going to get all my stuff back. But I was lucky enough that like 6 of my family members flew in. And I told all of them, all right, we're all going to check 2 large bags. So I had everyone bring all of their luggage, and everybody just started packing my stuff in their suitcases so that we could fly it all back to Chicago.
That's an expert move. Brilliant. I guess I'll pick up from that. When I went out to Chicago, it was just a drive, and I kind of went the long way because at the time my sister lived in State College, Pennsylvania. So I decided I'd make a bit of a long trip out of it because, it's very easy to go from Massachusetts just up through upstate New York, fall in 90 the whole way, and it drops you right in downtown. But I went down into Pennsylvania with a truck and my car on the back and, all my stuff in it. And getting there is not difficult at all. To what Craig said in the chat there, it's a very easy drive. Bring some audiobooks, podcasts, call people, think about life. There's lots of opportunities for that. And once you get there, the nice thing is, again, with the street parking being so easy, pulling up in front of wherever you're moving into, throwing your hazards on and unloading is not that much of a challenge. It's pretty straightforward.
Awesome. Thank you guys for answering that one. So our next section's housing, and this is kind of 2 combined into one, but You guys kind of mentioned this already, how you decided where you wanted to live within the city. So if there was anything to add to that, and in addition, if you are moving alone, what are the resources that you can use to find people to live with? I know, Craig, you were saying that you moved with some friends, and Christiana, you had family. So how did you guys navigate that?
Yeah, so this is something I'm actively doing now because my girlfriend is moving from Chicago, or she's moving from Boston to Chicago as soon as all this is over. So it's kind of like, it was funny, it reminded me of the same thing of coming into college. You join a Facebook group and you post, hey, my name is Craig, I'm 22, I like to watch Netflix, but I also like to go out looking for a room. Like, you do the same thing and you just meet people. And so my girlfriend just found her roommate. And I think it's like, I would highly recommend, especially if you don't know anyone, get a roommate, preferably who's from Chicago. That way you have someone to show you around, and you're not gonna, you can become friends with them and just get familiar. Have something to do something with. If there's a cool event that catches your eye, it's always good to turn to someone, ask if they want to go. So Facebook groups are a thing. And then side note, one service I found super helpful, I've used it twice, is this company called Apt Amigo. So if you go to APT as in Thomas, amigo.com, they're a service where you tell them, neighborhoods you're looking in, price ranges, just whatever you want. They book showings for you and they pay for your Ubers in between all of the showings. So they make it really easy on you. That way you can get around and not have to worry about it. And I found it convenient. So that's kind of the process we went through.
So when I decided to find an apartment in the city, I decided that I would move in with my boyfriend at the time, which was super easy, built-in roommate. Starting salaries are not usually that great for advertising, so it was nice to have someone else so that I could find a decent place. And the way that we actually found our apartment was through an app called Hot Pads with a Z. The listings look kind of sketchy, to be honest, and I did not know if the listing for this apartment was actually real until I came to visit. And the person who was moving out was actually moving to Northampton, and I figured it was a sign that I should take this apartment.
Christiana, that's so weird. My landlord moved from Chicago to Boston, so we just did a swap when we moved in.
What are the odds to Northampton? What? And then to Boston. This is crazy. So playing off of that, finding a roommate, going out, living on your own for the first time, definitely a good thing to have. I used a service called Roomster to get my first place, and I'll put that in the chat so you guys can check it out. Big fan. My thought process on finding a roommate was a little bit different because I had a friend that lived in Chicago that he was like, yeah, man, we can totally room together. I did not want to room with this guy. He's a good friend, very good friend, and I love him to death. I'd take a bullet for him. We have like slightly different living styles, so I just knew it wasn't going to be compatible. So the way I thought about it was, give me a business partner first, and then we'll become friends. So the guy I ended up living with was very neat, very tight. He kept to himself, and as a function of that, we had this nice foundation of respect and trust. We knew we'd always take the trash out and pay the bills, and everything was going to be handled. So that way, when we did get to know each other better, we had a very, very solid friendship. And he's actually in the special forces now. I missed the crap out of him. I hope he's doing okay. And if you're watching this, Casey, what's up? Good to see you. But anyway, so after that, I used Zillow to find my next two places, one in Lincoln Park and then my next one in Buena Park. I always look for a place with a lake view. My first apartment was on the 6th floor of an unobstructed east-facing building in Uptown. The second place was not. I missed it a lot. And where I am now is right on the lake. So I'm on the 16th floor with an unobstructed east-facing view. It is the best thing I've ever done in my entire life. I'll do it forever. I don't, it's like one of those things you pay for and you're paying for it in the rent. And even then, someone brought this up in the chat. How is expensive is Chicago compared to Boston? Not very. The kind of places you can get in the like $1,500 to $1,600 a month range in Boston would cost you probably $2,500 thereabouts. So you get a lot more for your money, goes a lot farther. But Craig, I'll definitely be back down with you over the summer. I like Lincoln Park a lot better than Buena. It's a lot more going on.
All right. Thank you guys so much for sharing those experiences. That was a lot of very specific resources. So that's really helpful, especially for people that might not necessarily have visited Chicago in the past or have any connections. So thank you for that. Our next section and our kind of final section is about budgeting. And I know that this was briefly mentioned because you talked about how you chose Chicago to live, or as where you wanted to live after UMass. But were you ready right away financially to move out to Chicago, or did you take a couple years? It sounded like Christiana, you went right back with your moving story with the suitcases, but could you guys elaborate a little bit more on that?
I'll say I moved, I lived with my parents, I think for about 5 months after I came back to this city because I was poor and I needed to save up a little bit for a deposit. But after I'd saved that money, then I definitely wouldn't have been able to move out if I was trying to move out on my own. So that's why I moved in with my ex-boyfriend at the time. So I would say you should definitely have some savings just in case something crazy happens with your first apartment or your first roommate skips out on rent. So for me, it was just about 5 months of living with my parents before I could do that.
As far as budgeting, I think like separate to this in general, start your career with a plan. Whatever it is, whatever you're making, have a budget, track your spending, start off right, because it's hugely important, and the sooner the better. But as far as my situation, I had it pretty easy. I didn't start until October after graduating. So I got to kind of hang around that summer and do like a little side work. So I was just living at home, kind of saving money. And then when I moved out, they were generous enough to put us up for a month to give us time to look. So they definitely made it as easy as possible on us. But had I not had that, it still would have been pretty doable. Like we all said, the city is very fair with affordability, and you can always find what you need. Whatever your price points are, you'll find a nice place in a great neighborhood with good food. So you're
There we go. I'm going to start off answering that question by hanging off Anaya in the chat. How easy was it to save and budget money, or hard? That is entirely on a personal basis. And I know for me at the time, it started out being difficult, but it got easier. So I didn't have a whole lot of financial discipline when I was initially starting the moving process, and I spent a lot of money on stuff that I didn't need to. It's not to say you shouldn't, treat yourself and do things to invest in yourself. For sure, that's important. But also being mindful when you're saving up to move out. Like you should make a plan. Like Craig said, have a plan in place. Do some homework. Figure out how much stuff costs. How much is it for a truck? If you got to tow a car behind you, how much is the trailer? How much are you going to pay for parking? What are you planning on budgeting for groceries? Figure on a couple months worth of expenses, so that way when you're looking for a job, if you move out without having a job like I did, you can have something to fall back on. And the way it worked for me was I got this dead end sales job in medical staffing that was awful, and they treated us like crap, but the money was okay. So I grounded out for 9 months. And this place was weird because you couldn't put in notice. If you asked to leave, they made you leave right then and there. They wouldn't even let you finish the day, which was kind of strange, but I digress. So that was how it all went. And I was glad I did it that way rather than just moving out and say, oh, I'll figure it out while I go, because I had a nice cushion to fall back on for a little while I figured things out and got myself settled, laid my roots down. So make a plan, be willing to adjust your plan as you see necessary, and enjoy the whole experience.
And just to echo that sentiment about keeping a budget, I have this Excel spreadsheet with my budget that I've been using obsessively since the day that I moved out, because I knew that at some point I wanted to live by myself like I currently do. But going beyond your own personal budget and keeping track of your own expenses, I would say if you have a roommate that you trust and that you share expenses with, it might also be helpful to have a budget tracker with that person. So my ex-boyfriend and I are both people who are very obsessed with Excel and keeping track of useless data. So we had an Excel spreadsheet for our finances together. And like anytime he would buy groceries for me, like it would go itemized in our Excel spreadsheet, and we would keep track of who owed the other person more, and just so that there wouldn't be any questions or debate about the money. So if you're going in with a roommate and you feel like that's something that might work out for you, that could be something to consider.
Totally. And then another reason why I'm a big roommate person, especially at first, is you get to share the fixed costs. So electricity and water, like that changes with the number of people, but things like internet, that's, either you're going to pay that your whole month or someone else will. So it helps bring down costs in that sense. So it's another reason to consider.
Awesome. And this kind of comes right off of what Nate brought up in his sentiment about moving to Chicago, but were there any expenses you didn't expect prior to moving?
I was so surprised about the cost of furniture. I don't know why I thought that I would be able to get a living room for like $300. And then I realized the couch that I wanted wasn't even $300. But I would say that Chicago is an interesting city because we have a lot of really great thrift stores, including furniture thrift stores. I didn't end up getting my furniture from a furniture thrift store. I had a friend who was getting rid of their furniture, so I got it. But if you, like me, are surprised by the cost of furniture, there are definitely some affordable options that you can get in Chicago.
Okay, cost I was shocked by. This is an easy one. When you have income and then all of a sudden you don't anymore, that gets expensive. That gets very expensive. So that's something that it's always, this is the lesson I took away from that, is having an emergency fund. Not included in the in like cost of moving or anything like that, but again, like I mentioned earlier, one of the things that happened right early on, and I'm going to say this happened for me, not to me, because of the lessons I learned from it, was I was let go from a job I'd been working for only 6 weeks, and it was a big knock, and I used up pretty much all of the rest of my savings just figuring it out until I ended up working for Y Charts. But that is something that if you have an emergency fund, that is a good time to have it, and it's something you should plan for because you never know what's going to happen.
Totally. And yeah, I think the couch surprised me too. I was like, it's a couch. Why does it need to be hundreds of dollars? It wasn't even a nice couch. But to that point, also double, I got all of my bedroom furniture from this like warehouse where it's just like what you see is what we got. I got a steal of a deal. Also, the thrift stores are stacked here. The week before I came back, I think I went into like Savers or Salvation Army Heaven. I came out, I had to push a cart home with the amount of stuff I got and then walk it back. And it was all like unwrapped stuff. So a few, like, yeah, just like look it up ahead of time. What a couch is, figure out, okay, if there's roommates, are we going to split it? If they're from Chicago, they might have couches in the burbs they're bringing in. So just try to estimate what it is. It'll be good. Any ways you can divide costs, like furniture, stuff like that, is going to be good. And don't worry about getting it all at once. Like focus on the bed and a mattress, and then like kind of accumulate as we go. My apartment, like we still have one room completely unfurnished just because we have nothing to do with it. So it's just sitting there, which we should probably get on. But like take your time, feel it out. Amazon's got some really weird cheap furniture. Wayfair's got some sales. So we just kind of looked at what was on there. Walmart, we got deals, Black Friday. Just whatever you see, if there's ever a promotion, just, get it in advance and just look for coupons and stuff like that.
And just to echo Craig, don't feel bad if your apartment doesn't look lovely on the first try. I'm still putting my apartment together and I've been here for like 2.5 years, so.
All right, so we have one more kind of final wrap-up question, but before we do that, I just wanted to ask Leah if there was any outstanding questions in the chat that we wanted to pose.
No other questions that you guys haven't been answering. So yeah.
Perfect. All right. So this looks like we're going to end right on time. So kind of to wrap things up, what would be your last piece of advice or an overarching theme that you would want to give to students planning on making a move to Chicago or possibly considering it?
I would say to get outside of your bubble. And this is something that even people from Chicago struggle with. Chicago is really a city of communities. Like you'll find your group of people that you like. You'll find a club or an activity that you like. You'll find something and a group of people to support you in whatever it is that you want to do. And you end up just doing that or just staying in that one area of the city. There are a lot of people who don't go to the north side, which is where Lincoln Park is, or don't go to the south side, which is where Pilsen is. And Chicago is a really vast city with a lot to offer. So I would say if you're coming here and you know where you want to live and you have an idea of where you're going to work and where your friends are, try to challenge yourself to see more of the city there. I'm guilty of there still being some neighborhoods on the north side that I have not been to. So don't be like me and get out and see the whole city.
100%. I'm the reverse. I still need to venture down south more. So as soon as it gets nice, all those taco fests down in Pilsen, I'm on them because they have the best Mexican food down in Pilsen. But honestly, the same thing you just said. I think a lot of people, I'd say this, if you're considering other cities, Chicago's is amazing. Like, it has everything you could, no matter who you are, what you like, they have it. It's not overcrowded. It's not loud. It's not dirty. Like, you can walk through downtown in the middle of the day and it's quiet. It's beautiful. You have the river. It's turquoise. They have events. Like, they have a marathon. Like, anything you can do in a city, you go to the beach, like, it's there. It's all in one city, and it's affordable. It's like the perfect thing. I think if it wasn't so cold for so much of the year, it'd be like the coolest city in the world. But, you know, on that note, I think the biggest thing is deciding to leave or not. And I say go for it. Worst case, you go home and you go back to where you were and you gain a little bit. In best case, you find so much more. I was definitely worried about losing touch with friends or things going on, but it's not like the same old, same old. We go to the same place when I'm home. Nothing changes. Everything's virtual. So I've just met such amazing people and done such extraordinary things that I just wouldn't have done here. And I'm someone who loves variety. I'm someone who likes to see what's new and exploring. And I feel like I'm a kid in a candy shop in Chicago, and I just still haven't even scratched the surface after being there almost 2 years. So I'd say take a shot. We're young.
Or for that matter, take a shot. You're old. Doesn't matter. Take the
Take
shot.
a shot. You're running out of time.
Take the shot. You got only so many trips around the sun. So right, I love that, Craig. It's a fantastic attitude, and Christiana, to play off of what you were saying, to challenge yourself to do something that you wouldn't do every day. If that means go to Pilsen and have some tacos, or go up to the north side and venture into the deep, dark north where there's snow going 6 feet above the sidewalks and nobody speaks English, who knows? Maybe either one would be fine. But even if that thing that you're thinking of is like, man, I'm going to challenge myself to put everything I know in a box, put it in a truck, drive 1,000 miles, and start over. Or I have to go, whether it's Chicago or anywhere, do it with an open mind and an open heart. And this is something that everything that's going on with the COVID situation has brought to my attention. It's not where you are, it's who you are when you're there. You can be you can have a very small world and be on a plane hopping from country to country to country to country to country. If you just keep your focus like this and stay closed off and don't experience things. And you can have the biggest world in the entire world right from your bedroom. It's not where you are, it's who you are.
Thank you for that from each of you. That was awesome. And I'm gonna quickly go through our kind of closing thoughts, and then the president of SAA has a fun question that she would like you guys to answer. So we'll kind of completely summarize with that question, if you guys don't mind. So bringing this back up. Oh. All right. We want to thank all of our panelists for joining us tonight, and we hope you leave this session with more information about moving to a new city. As far as career resources go, we wanted to let our audience know that the UMass Alumni Association provides career support, including the alumni advisors, where students can get advice from alumni. We also have career counselors who can guide you on your career path. And in addition, there are many events held throughout the year, and we have many virtual going on right now to help support you. And we hope you will check these resources out at umassalumni.com/career. So in summary, Aaliyah, do you want to ask the question?
Yes. Okay, so this is for everybody. So finish this statement Chicago style. So you come for the pizza and you stay for the blank.
Architecture, easy.
I'm going to go the variety. Like there's so much to do on all fronts. Right.
For a second, Craig, I thought you were going to say the variety of different kinds of pizza, because there are a lot of different kinds of pizza,
Yeah.
for sure. And before I answer the question, undisputed best deep dish in Chicago, in my opinion, for anyone who's asking, is Pequod's. It's the little.
I live across the street from Pequod's.
Do you really?
Dead across the street. You walk out the front door, you're staring at mine.
Free Chicagoans are not deep dish fans, by the way. My favorite place is called Phil's.
I've heard that. I've heard that, yeah.
Pequod.
Okay, let's see. Come to Chicago for the pizza and stay for the growth opportunities. And the people. The people are amazing.
Thank you guys for answering that fun one. That summarizes our webinar for today. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, and thank you to all the attendees who stayed and asked questions. That was awesome. Thank you.